The Age of Competition. Report overviews world is entering an age of competition, marked by rising turbulence, retreating cooperation, and a shift in attention away from long-term environmental risks toward immediate geoeconomic, societal, and technological threats. Drawing on the Global Risks Perception Survey GRPS 2025 to 2026 and the Executive Opinion Survey EOS. The report, published in January 2026, examines 33 global risks across immediate 2026, short-term to 2028, and long-term to 2036 horizons. It situates current dynamics within four structural forces: technological acceleration, geostrategic shifts, climate change, and demographic bifurcation, arguing that these drivers interact to produce compounding and potentially systemic crises. Report structure. Report's major chapters are organized to first map the shifting risk landscape and then probe the cross-cutting themes shaping it. The front matter includes a preface, an overview of methodology, and key findings. Chapter 1. Global Risks 2026 to 2036. The Age of Competition traces how risk salience evolves across the three horizons and how the overall outlook darkens. Chapter 2. Global Risks in Depth. Anticipating Tomorrow's Challenges Today explores 7 sections: the structural context, multipolarity without multilateralism, values at war, an economic reckoning, infrastructure endangered, quantum leaps, and AI at large. The back matter provides endnotes. Appendices covering definitions and the global risks list, the GRPS 2025 to 2026, national risk perceptions from the EOS, and risk governance, as well as partner institutes and acknowledgments. Key findings underscore a more turbulent decade ahead. Half of surveyed leaders expect a turbulent or stormy world over the next 2 years, rising to 57% over 10 years, with only 1% anticipating a calm outlook on either horizon. Short-term pessimism has climbed compared with last year, though long-term expectations have improved slightly versus the previous edition. Multilateralism is in retreat as competition rises. Geoeconomic confrontation is the single most severe risk in the 2-year horizon, reflecting the strategic weaponization of trade, finance, technology, and supply chains. Fully 68% of respondents foresee a multipolar or fragmented order dominated by contesting powers, while just 6% expect a reinvigorated, rules-based, us-led order. Economic and technological risk dynamics. Economic risks are intensifying. Economic downturn, inflation, and asset bubble bursts register some of the largest upward jumps in short-term rankings compared with last year. Concerns over debt sustainability and potential bubbles interacting with geoeconomic confrontation suggest a more volatile macroeconomic environment. Technology presents opportunity alongside fast-rising risks. Misinformation and disinformation rank among the top global risks in the next 2 years, and cyber insecurity remains in the top tier. Adverse outcomes of AI technologies show the steepest rise between the 2-year and 10-year horizons, signaling growing anxiety about AI's longer-term societal, economic, and security impacts. Societal strain and environmental reprioritization. Social strain and inequality emerge as a hub risk. Inequality is identified as the most interconnected risk over the next decade, acting as a driver and amplifier of many others. Societal polarization, erosion of human rights and civic freedoms, and streets versus elites narratives are seen as eroding trust, weakening democratic resilience, and hampering effective crisis response. Environmental risks, while dropping in short-term rankings where extreme weather, pollution, critical change to Earth systems, and biodiversity loss all decline in 2-year severity versus last year, reassert dominance over the long term. Extreme weather is the number one long-term risk, and about half of the top 10 long-term risks are environmental. The report's 6 in-depth themes: multipolarity without multilateralism, values at war, and economic reckoning. Infrastructure endangered, quantum leaps. And AI at large show how structural forces interact to produce compounding and potentially systemic crises. Chapter 1. Global Risks 2026 to 2036. The Age of Competition 2026. On a Precipician 2026. The world stands on a precipice, fragmented by kinetic wars and economic weapons, with trade, finance, and technology deployed as tools of influence while rules-based institutions come under siege. Crisis triggers for 2026 are led by geoeconomic confrontation, 18% of respondents, and state-based armed conflict, 14%, followed by extreme weather events. Societal polarization, misinformation, or disinformation. Economic downturn, erosion of human rights. AI-related adverse outcomes, cyber insecurity, and inequality. Societal risks such as polarization and inequality remain high but stable. Concern about erosion of human rights rises. Environmental risks like extreme weather and critical Earth systems decline in relative salience versus last year. TO 2028. Compounding risks looking to 2028. Geoeconomic confrontation remains most severe, with misinformation and disinformation at number 2, followed by societal polarization, extreme weather, and state-based armed conflict. Rising geoeconomic tensions coincide with inequality and the uneven impacts of transformation, while technology risks, disinformation, and cyber insecurity amplify divides and weaken crisis response. Environmental risks persist in the top 10. Extreme weather. Pollution yet sees some of the largest drops in ranking. Critical Earth systems change and biodiversity loss fall sharply as attention pivots to geoeconomic and societal shocks. Economic risks downturn, inflation, asset bubbles climb rapidly. Disruptions to critical infrastructure also rise, signaling a more volatile macro and physical operating environment. TO 2036, over the edge. By 2036, environmental risks dominate. Extreme weather remains the top long-term risk, followed by biodiversity loss, critical Earth systems change, and natural resource shortages. Pollution rounds out the top 10. Technological risks, including adverse outcomes of AI and frontier technologies, show steep increases in severity from the 2-year to the 10-year horizon, underlining long-run concerns around AI and quantum. Societal risks, inequality, and societal polarization stay prominent. Uniquely, geoeconomic confrontation declines in severity and falls from a top short-term risk to much lower long-term prominence. While economic risks do not appear in the top 10 long-term list, their severity scores drift upward across the board, notably for concentration of strategic resources. Disruptions to critical infrastructure, debt, asset bubbles, and economic downturn, a darkening outlook. The qualitative outlook darkens. 50% see the next 2 years as turbulent or stormy, rising to 57% over 10. Virtually no one expects calm. Short-term pessimism rises sharply versus last year. There is a 14-point jump in turbulent stormy over 2 years, though the long-term outlook is slightly less negative than in the previous edition. Over 2 years, respondents are most worried about geopolitical risks, with nearly 2/3 rating the geopolitical outlook as turbulent or stormy, while technological risks are seen relatively more positively in the near term. Over 10 years, environmental risks attract the most pessimism, with nearly 3/4 expecting a turbulent or stormy environmental outlook. Reinforcing Climate and Nature as Defining Long-Term Threats, Chapter 2, Global Risks in Depth, Anticipating Tomorrow's Challenges. Today's Structural Change Backdrop Chapter 2 delves into 6 thematic clusters against the backdrop of the 4 structural forces: technological acceleration, geostrategic shifts, climate change, and demographic bifurcation, which interact to amplify risks across technology, climate, security, and demographics. Multipolarity without multilateralism. Without multilateralism tracks the weakening of rules-based order and the use of sanctions. Export controls, investment screening, financial restrictions, and supply chain disruptions as strategic weapons. Geoeconomic confrontation, the top short-term risk, is tightly linked to state-based armed conflict and could lead to partial decoupling in trade, finance, and technology, slowing global growth and disproportionately harming non-aligned and emerging economies. As funding for international institutions shrinks and parallel institutions emerge, global governance gaps widen, complicating cross-border challenges like climate change, pandemics, and organized crime. Views at War examines how societal polarization, misinformation or disinformation, and inequality reinforce one another, undermining trust and weakening social contracts. New technological capabilities enable manipulation at scale, fueling streets versus elites narratives, extremism, and desensitization. GRPS data show a strong link between societal polarization and mis- or disinformation. Climate and inclusion agendas are pulled into these cultural and political conflicts, making ambitious socio-environmental action harder to sustain. An economic reckoning highlights high global debt refinancing needs, rising asset price and industrial bubbles, and the risk of boomerang inflation as core macro financial vulnerabilities. Economic downturn, inflation, and asset bubble bursts post some of the sharpest short-term ranking increases. Disruptions to critical infrastructure also rise, signaling a more fragile financial and real economy foundation. Financial stress could be magnified by geoeconomic confrontation through weaponized capital flows, asset seizures, and sanctions on payment systems, and by rapid AI and quantum-driven shifts in market structure. Infrastructure endangered focuses on aging, under-maintained energy, transport, water, digital, and health systems facing more frequent and intense extreme weather and climate impacts. Critical nodes, ports, electricity grids, data cables are choke points where failures can cascade into supply chain shocks, social unrest, and economic crises. Infrastructure is also a front line in conflict via cyberattacks and physical sabotage of pipelines, cables, satellites, and logistics corridors. Quantum Leap surveys the promise and peril of quantum technologies across computing, sensing, and communications, with applications from climate modeling and drug discovery to advanced military capabilities. These advances pose severe security risks by threatening current cryptography and enabling powerful new surveillance and weapons systems, potentially widening divides between quantum leaders and laggards. A Q2 in the rest world may emerge as US-China-led quantum ecosystems and export controls deepen geoeconomic rivalry, industrial asymmetries, and societal polarization. I at large addresses the fastest rising long-term risk in the GRPS: adverse outcomes of AI technologies, climbing from rank 30 at the 2-year horizon to rank 5 at 10 years. 3 risk sets are central. In labor markets, simultaneous productivity gains and job displacement could entrench permanently shaped economies, worsening inequality and social strain. For human cognition, and well-being. Over-reliance on AI, the proliferation of AI companions, and degraded information ecosystems may erode critical thinking, mental health, and even the perceived value of being human. Insecurity and escalation. AI-enabled cyber operations, autonomous weapons, and AI-supported decision-making in nuclear and conventional command systems could compress crisis timelines and heighten risks of accidental or rapid escalation. The chapter underscores uneven AI adoption higher in North America than in sub-Saharan Africa and the concentration of AI data centers in advanced economies, potentially shifting economic power and deepening internal and cross-border divides. Conclusion: cooperation in a competitive era. Its chapters and themes. The report urges renewed forms of cooperation tailored to a competitive era. It contends that without creative governance bridging multipolar rivalry, technology acceleration, climatic disruption, and demographic divergence, the next decade will likely be defined by compounding shocks and a darkening global outlook.